Well, it's 8 o'clock on Friday or Saturday? Saturday, I think now.
Saturday.
The 11th of January 2003. And this is Mark Turin, sitting here in Gangtok, Sikkim, of all places, with retired Professor Asen Balikci, Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, not so important, but nevertheless pleasant to mention, who is visiting his daughter, Dr. Anna Balikci, who recently received her PhD from SOAS in anthropology, specializing in Sikkim, the Himalayas. It gives me great pleasure just to sit here and ask a few questions, perhaps, to Professor Balikci. We have a short time, it's be dinner time soon, so before then, to start, could you perhaps tell me a few things about your background? For example, in what year and what day were you born?
I was born at the very end of 1929 in Istanbul, Turkey. I'm not Turk, I'm not Muslim. My parents were Bulgarian, South Slavic. My father was a fish merchant in the bazaar of Istanbul. And that's where I grew up.
Can you tell me perhaps how it was that your parents, your father, came to be a fish merchant as a Bulgarian in Istanbul? Was this a normal thing to be doing at that time?
No. My father comes from a village today in northern Greece near the town of Kastoria, near the Albanian border. And he's of Slavic Macedonian stock. My mother comes from a Bulgarian village very close to Istanbul, about 20-25 kilometers north of Istanbul. And my mother's father, my maternal grandfather, had fishing rights given to him by the Sultan in a large lake north of Istanbul. He was the fisherman, and he was also a landlord, a kind of a feudal landlord. So that is where the fishing comes from. My father, he grew up in Istanbul, and he became a milkman. He owned cattle, milked them, and sold the milk to the Macedonian milk shops in Istanbul. But when he married my mother, that was right after the First World War, he inherited his father's-in-law fish business. And that is how he became a fish trader, a fish merchant. The story is much more complicated and is linked up to several Balkan wars, etc., etc.
I think you mentioned to me the day before yesterday, when we were talking, that your surname, your family name, Balikci, means fisherman.
Exactly.
If your father inherited the trade in a way through marriage, no?
Yes.
How was it that he came to get the name fisherman? You think he might have the name milkman instead?
No, because I personally, with my father, my father selected this name. That was right after the Second World War. Before that, our name was Nikolov. But my father was fearing persecution of Slavic Christians in Kemalist Turkey, and that is why he took a Turkish name, his professional, his trade name. Not my mother, not my sister. They are Nikolov.
To this day?
Yes, to this day, of course, because women don't count legally in Turkey, so it is most important for me, for the young man, to have a Turkish name, so that when I will go in the Turkish army, I would look like a real Turk.
Does this mean that your school reports, your school records, etc., were Nikolov?
Nikolov.
Did you formally change your name?
Yes. I was a student in Switzerland at the time, and nobody could understand why I would change my name. I tried to explain about the intricacy of Balkan names, and nobody was able to understand. But anyhow, I changed my name legally.
Right. At this time, growing up in Turkey, what was your lingua franca? What did you speak at home? And maybe
At home, only Bulgarian. At home, we spoke standard Bulgarian. We did not speak the Macedonian dialect because of my mother, who was Bulgarian. And outside on the street, of course, we spoke Turkish. And at school, I spoke French because I went to a French school. The Lazarist fathers in Istanbul. So I grew up with 3 languages basically, but my Turkish was very poor. My Turkish was bazaar Turkish.
Were your parents both literate?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
They were literate in Greek because both of them went to Greek schools, and I can say that their first language basically was Greek. My father also had gone to French school and he spoke very good French.
Why were you not sent to Greek school?
Because by that time there were Bulgarian schools already in existence.
Bulgarian meaning also Bulgarian Christian, Orthodox.
Yes. But the Greek schools, of course, are Christian Orthodox also.
True. Can you give me a sense, since I know nothing about this part of the world and history really, just vague images, what it was like growing up at that time in Turkey? What the major cultural influences were? What young people were talking about?
I went to a school to the French school. I can tell you a little bit what the environment was there. Most of the school boys at l'école Saint-Benoît were Greek, Jewish, Armenian, and a few Turks and Levantines like us, of nondescript origin basically. And we were afraid of the Turks. The Turks were much older than us. Purposely, they flunked all their exams and they stayed in class until the age of 25, 26 in order to avoid going to the army. And so there was fear. I grew up surrounded by fear, you see. Never a Turk visited our house. I don't remember for a single Turk having entered our home. Never. Greeks, yes. Jews, yes. Armenians, yes, but never a Turk. So basically the ethnic groups were rigorously segregated. They mixed in bazaar. In bazaar they're all mixed. But at home never.
What was this fear you speak of?
Fear was of one of pogroms, massacres, the way you want to call it. We always coming from the Turks, you see, who were the dominant ethnic group in the Ottoman Empire, as we know. So we were afraid of a pogrom, what is known. You see. Now a pogrom a pogrom in the Ottoman Empire usually came at appropriate moments of war. So that is why my father, we were living in Istanbul at the time before the war, when 38, 39, my father felt that a war was going to take place, and he said, let's go back to Bulgaria. Let's go to Bulgaria. We're Bulgarian, although we are not Bulgarian citizens, we're Turkish citizens, but let's go home. We will not be massacred. While in Istanbul, in Turkey, we were in a dangerous position. So we went at the beginning of the war, we went back to Bulgaria, and we left 3 days before the arrival of the Red Army in Bulgaria.
You left to where?
To Istanbul, back to Istanbul.
Back again?
Back to Istanbul.
So how long was your sojourn in Bulgaria in total?
4 or 5 years.
Was your education continuous? You just picked up literally in Bulgaria where you
In
left
Bulgaria, I went to Bulgarian school.
The divisions you speak of in Turkish society, at least between your society and maybe standard Turkish society at that time, would you say the differences were primarily religious, or were they more than that cultural in terms of etiquette, cuisine, habits?
Everything. Not cuisine. Cuisine is the same, or roughly the same, but etiquette, language, ethics, worldview, basically culture. Fundamentally different. I mean, you can feel it in Greece today, in northern Greece, where there is an important Turkish community. You see, it is the Bulgarians, Macedonians, Slavo-Macedonians in northern Greece. There were hundreds of thousands. They melted in Greek society. The Turks, no. They remain Turk. You see, a Muslim cannot change religion. Such a thing is unheard of. It has taken place, today it takes place in Bulgaria, but among the gypsies. The gypsies who are Muslim, but they now have started joining American evangelist churches for the material benefits and with the hope to immigrate to America one day. But Turkish Muslim, no.
So by the age of 10, you had already travelled to Bulgaria and back again to Turkey?
Yes.
Essentially. Thereafter, did you continue to live in modern Turkey? Or
until 46. 46, with the first boat that crossed the Mediterranean, which at the time was still full with mines, my father decided that my sister and myself should go and study in Switzerland. So 46, we arrived in Geneva, and I went there to a private school, l'École Internationale de Genève, and became fully French-speaking, which is the language I know the best today. So I studied for the Baccalauréat Français, and then studied at university, economics and sociology.
To backtrack a little, I'm intrigued by the move, firstly to Bulgaria. I take it that the war passed you by with a little event, essentially, no great tragedies in your family at that time? Or
no, we were bombarded. The Americans bombarded Sofia in January 43. Our apartment block was not destroyed, but it was hit. Bulgaria could do nothing about it. I mean, flying fortresses were flying as fortresses, and that was it. We ran away and we were evacuated to a small town. The situation there was not much better because the partisans were attacking and the army was chasing them and hitting back. Tragic moments, difficult to understand.
Do you have memories of the war?
Yes, from that war, yes.
From that period?
Because we were school children. I will never forget one day 6 partisans were killed in town and their bodies were thrown in front of the church in the little town. And we school children were obliged to walk in front of them and look at them. That was spring 1944. So every night we used to hear machine gun fire not far from our house. There were planes flying high over. There were American planes from Sicily going to bombard the Romanian oil fields and going back. Some of them would go astray, you know, and will fly low. Maybe they have been hit. And so we were looking at these planes flying low and barely, managing to go back. So these were
Difficult times.
Difficult time.
Do you think, in retrospect, that your father made the right decision to leave Turkey before the war and go to Bulgaria? And Bulgaria is bombarded. You could have been hit.
Yes, that is true. But anyhow, Bulgaria did not participate actively in the war, with the exception that it declared war on America in 1942. Bulgaria declared war on America. Yes, there is such a thing. Yeah. You are in the Balkans.
What was the rationale for that, do you think?
Because the Germans were in the country. They occupied the country, and Hitler wanted the Bulgarian army to be sent east against the Soviet front, and Bulgaria refused. That's the king. The king refused absolutely. But the king had to do something in order to show that he's pro-German, you know. So he declared war on America.
I see. Thank you. But we'll fast forward now back. So you returned to Turkey after the war, a land devastated.
No, Turkey, no.
Not at all?
Turkey did not join the war.
But culturally profoundly affected?
Bepan?
Culturally affected by the changes of the post-war years? Were they...
No, we returned in 1944 from Bulgaria to Turkey. That was in the middle of the war. In 1944 we returned to Turkey, to Istanbul, and the situation was perfectly normal there. And Turkey had been neutral all during the war. Did not take sides.
Was it already a modern country? Could you say that?
No. You see, Istanbul at the time had about 750,000 inhabitants. About the same population as during the beginning of the Ottoman Empire, at the time of Evliya Çelebi, let's say 17th century, if I'm not mistaken. I may make an error there. He counted about 700,000 inhabitants. Traditional country. We did not have contact with the Turks, and certainly not with Turkish villages and Turkish peasants. We were as Christian, we were not allowed to travel in Anatolia. So we had to stay in Istanbul. And we stayed on the European side of Istanbul among our people, so to say. And so I did not know much about Turkey. Even as a child, as a young man, I had never been inside Hagia Sophia, Saint Sophie Church. So I really didn't know anything about Turkey. Didn't know much.
You mentioned the day before yesterday.
I learned about Turkey much later, when I read the book by Mahmud Makal, An Anatolian Village, written in 53, if I'm not mistaken.
And that was Turkey opening for you. That was the beginning of understanding about.
Then I understood what life was in a Turkish village at the time when I was an adolescent.
Ironic. You mentioned the other day that your first encounter with modernity was the American Marines. Could you tell the story again, please?
As a matter of fact, that was the second. I will tell you about the real first one. The real first one was in 1940 in Bulgaria. In Bulgaria, we had just arrived from Istanbul to Bulgaria. I had an uncle. His name was Lazar, Uncle Lazar, who was a Bulgarian officer during the First World War. During the First World War, Bulgaria joined Austria and Germany and fought against the French and the British in Macedonia in the Thessaloniki front. And my uncle was active there on horseback. And there were also German artillery, German officers near him. He was an officer, my uncle. And he knew some German, and 1940, the German army entered Bulgaria on its way towards Greece and Yugoslavia. I was 10 years old, and my uncle declared, "The German army is arriving, it is crossing the country, and right now we were told that the first units are near Sofia, practically inside Sofia, going south towards Greece. Let's go and see them. Maybe I will find some of the old German officers that I knew on the front there in Thessaloniki when we were fighting the Maréchal Franchet d'Espéré. You see. So he took me with him, I was 10 years old, to go and search for the German officers. He was terribly excited, and he expected to see the German officers on horseback and the soldiers, infantry walking. And yet we didn't see any Germans on horseback. There were just half-tracks, tanks, trucks, etc., etc. So he was terribly disappointed. That was my first contact with modernity. You see, it was the German army. The second contact with modernity was in Istanbul, 1945. An American battleship, I think, I remember, had arrived, and sailors were set free, to go out and spend the day in Istanbul. And they were walking along the streets, and they were impeccably dressed in white uniforms, And we, Turkish boys, we were not accustomed to such, to see such soldiers, because Turkish soldiers were very poorly dressed, very dirty. So all of a sudden, elements like this can be considered as markers of cultural distance. Not only difference, but distance, extreme distance.
Now to fast forward to the moment you were telling me about. So at a certain point, your father thinks, or you think, Geneva, after the war, this is the place to study, in French.
Yeah.
What is the rationale behind this?
Geneva, the rationale is that we, people from the Balkans, are not cultured. We have no culture.
This is what you believe, or what your father believes? Or?
Everybody. It's not me or my father. Everybody in the Balkans, we are not cultured.
I see.
West Europeans are cultured. The French are cultured, the Germans, the British, and of course the Swiss. So in order to become cultured, we have to go and study there. And when we come back, we speak a Western language, and we have a profession. We have studied medicine or law, etc., etc., and we are considered cultured. And that is also today, until now.
Is the same the case now for Turkey?
Absolutely.
Why Geneva? Why not London?
Traditionally, 19th century, many students from Eastern Europe used to go to Geneva, including Lenin. He was there. At Café Landolt in Geneva, there is a table where Lenin used to stay and to write and chat with colleagues. So, and it is always also easy to find some distant uncle, etc., who had been there to study. So we went there.
Both of you, you and your sister?
My sister and myself. My sister, she went to university, she's 4 years older than me, to study literature, and I went to school to study for the baccalaureate.
At what age we're talking now?
I was exactly
50?
16.
So this strikes me as the third serious and rather more long-lasting encounter with modernity.
Yeah.
What were your impressions
Very
when you arrived?
definitely.
What was the...
My impression was, now don't forget that I arrived there in Geneva in a very favorable environment, to say the least, in private school. And my feeling was that there was good reason for us to be considered, at least Balkan people, to be considered as uncultured. And that real culture was there. And real culture was everywhere. In table manners, in food, in the language, in the studies, in the buildings, in the style of interpersonal relations, in the books, in the films, everywhere. It was global and overwhelming culture, which every second of the day told you, it meant for you that you are not part of it and you are uncultured.
Was there any sense then that you might learn it? Was it incorporative? No. Was it exclusive?
No, you can learn, coming from the Balkans, you can learn bits and pieces of it, but you have no way to influence it, to act upon it, to change it, even in the slightest manner. You are totally impotent at the margins of this culture, which is sort of a monolithic, heavy, you see, and definitely set. Now, I did not have at all this feeling in North America. I had a feeling in North America, whether it is Canada or the States, that I could manipulate Canadian culture. I could act upon it, not only be influenced by it, which of course was true, but I could somehow influence the culture, not in Western Europe. I mean,
why? Is it the
look
the
at the Cathedral of Chartres. Can you change anything in it? You cannot. I mean, the Cathedral of Chartres is the way it is. You cannot improve it. While in America, there is always way to improve on things, buildings, houses. I have improved my house in Montreal 10 times. In Paris, you cannot do it. You cannot improve. You can paint. So you see, things are fixed there. And they had clearly, that gave me a feeling of impotence. You see, stability. I will not say perfection, but the organizational stability, and also kind of the visible architectural stability of society, of culture, that impressed me most.
Were there other foreign students in the international school?
There were only foreign students there, mostly foreign students. It was a good school. I mean, there were.
This feeling of being then out of touch and somehow impotent in the cultural norms of the country, was that shared by others in the school? Or was it particularly a feature of
I don't know, because it was difficult for me to speak about these things with the others. Most of the others felt at home there, because they were coming from very upper class European families or American families, but mostly European. Very upper class.
Do you have lasting friendships from that time in school?
Yeah, until recently I used to see a young, at the time, fellow in Geneva, but
anthropologists whom I've met, some others whose work I've read, speak of early on in their lives finding a culture clash, finding themselves on the outside of a cultural norm, viewing the inside, and that as being some way early training for anthropology. Would that be true of yourself also?
Finding myself
Is it, as you say, impotent, able to view, able to learn perhaps the language, the etiquette, but
and
never
remaining
being
outside?
Yes.
It's a very difficult. See, I was an outsider. I was definitely an outsider. That's it. I was at the periphery. The only time I was not, the only society in my life I was not at the periphery was when I was a school child in Sofia during the war.
4 years.
4 years, 5 years during the war. In Istanbul, going back, I was definitely a foreigner. Definitely. In Geneva, definitely a foreigner. Then going to Canada, definitely a foreigner. So all my life I am a professional foreigner. That's why probably I went into anthropology, you see. And no matter how much you learn about a culture, you don't belong to it. I mean, what can you simply don't belong. Knowledge doesn't mean that you belong. You have to be born into it in order to belong.
So having finished your studies in the international school, you continued your studies at university in Geneva.
Yes.
And you mentioned economics and sociology.
Yeah, that was a tragedy, because I thought that, of course, I should study something that would allow me to make a living later on, and I thought that economics would do it. It didn't. Then I thought it was sociology. It should be sociology. There was a very famous sociology teacher at the time who was a psychologist, Jean Piaget, so I took his courses. And
you studied with Piaget?
Yeah. And frightening figure. Frightening.
In what sense?
In the sense that very simple, honest man, you see, but he expressed total intellectual dominance, which meant again that there was nothing that you could do in relation to the intellectual dominance of Jean Piaget. You remain completely at the periphery, just the same feeling as in front of the Cathedral de Chartres. You see, you cannot touch it.
It seems to be.
So it is castrating influence.
It seems to be.
And I'm not alone to think that, because in later years I had discussions with some of his assistants and collaborators who had published books with him, and they said the same thing. Very honest, very simple. He was meaning all well-meaning, and yet produced a feeling of castration among his disciples.
Because of brilliance or because of exclusion?
Intellectual dominance, brilliance, and epistemological dominance, I would say.
Studying economics and sociology, did your father or your family back in Turkey still at this time, I suppose?
They were in Turkey.
Were they satisfied with this choice, or were they hoping for a son who would be a doctor or a lawyer?
No, they did not expect. They expected that I will go back, of course, and continue in the fish business. I did not go. They did not send me in Geneva in order to acquire a profession. They sent me in Geneva to become cultured.
Yet they expected you to return to the family business?
Of course, to the family business in Istanbul.
Is that somewhat naive of them?
Of course. It was naive. Well, see, things changed with time, but that were the expectations. You see, 19th century Balkan boys who went to study in Geneva or Montpellier or other German cities, for instance, they came back to the Balkans. They did not stay there. Practically nobody stayed there. They could not adapt. They could not get the jobs. And so I went there to become cultured. And I started studying economics and sociology, but basically I was not interested. And
in what were you interested?
Well, I was interested vaguely in ethnography, but I participated with a friend of mine in Geneva. We organized an expedition in the grottos of the Moyen Atlas, Middle Atlas in Morocco. I was first or second year student, I don't remember, undergraduate student. That means that I was 19 or 20. We drove from Geneva to Morocco, and my friend was a biology student. He went inside a cave looking for microscopic fauna inside the cave with a rope. I was holding the rope. Then I got fed up holding the rope in my hands, and I tied it up to a tree. And right nearby there was a small Berber village. I started walking among the houses of the Berber village, and at the end of my walk, I decided to study ethnography. I didn't know about anthropology. I knew that ethnography was the science that studies traditional folk people.
What had occurred or happened to you during that walk?
There was a feeling of real something very real, some real culture, or about some people who were not pretending to be. People who had produced everything in their village, and who have built their houses themselves. A very, very traditional environment. And I had become an ethnographer at the end of the day.
If I may venture a slightly psychological question here, does it also have to do you think, with the feeling of you being excluded from, feeling impotent, castrated, you have mentioned, in Geneva, and yet here feeling this is a culture you could understand or become part of? Not that.
No, we were, I don't think that I was operating at the level of understanding, but at the level of feeling. What probably could have happened at that moment is that I must have had the same feeling as in Bulgaria as a child in the Rhodope Mountains, when walking in peasant villages, and the wooden plow pulled by cows, horses, and no electricity. All clothing was made at home. A very traditional society.
I'm intrigued by the fact that you say ethnography?
Ethnography.
Not ethnology? Or a bit of both?
Well, a bit of both.
But not anthropology, at least?
Anthropology is physical anthropology in Europe. At that time
That's what it meant?
Yes, physical anthropology.
But ethnology or ethno-something?
Ethno-something.
Ethno-something was something you'd heard of?
Yes, I must have heard. Because at the end of my studies of sociology and economics, I decided, I went to the museum in Geneva and asked to become an assistant there. And I was put to classify African objects. And this with the aim of learning about ethnography. And there I bought the Manuel d'ethnographie de Marcel Mauss. He had published a manual of ethnography, Marcel Mauss. I bought and started reading it in order to become an ethnographer, you see. And during the day I was classifying, cataloging African artifacts.
Your training in sociology was deemed to be sufficient? You received the job without much problem?
It was not a job. It was an unpaid volunteer.
I see. According to what system were you classifying them? Can you remember?
No, I don't remember. Yes. We had to identify. There were mostly arms, spears, shields, etc. So I had a stack of old books, and I tried to find pictures, pictorial reproductions of the same items, and then try to locate their origin.
Did the book by Marcel Mauss help in your training to become an ethnographer?
I think that this book must have sort of must have inspired me, and also structured my vision of ethnography. It was Manuel d'ethnographie. There was no anthropology was not mentioned there.
So, but during your studies, you didn't have the occasion then to take ethnographic classes in Geneva. You were focused on...
No, Professor Sauter was teaching archaeology, classic archaeology, Paleolithic, and essentially Paleolithic West European archaeology, and he was teaching human biology, physical anthropology, but there was no ethnography being taught. So I started reading about ethnography myself privately.
What happened then?
Then I completed my degrees in Geneva, and there was no teaching of ethnography in Geneva. There was teaching of ethnography in Neuchâtel. Again, I went there as a student and as a voluntary worker, benevolent worker in the museum in Neuchâtel. Spent a year, and at the end of the year I did not learn much, and I had to go away, to go somewhere. I couldn't stay in Switzerland indefinitely because there was no future for me.
Passport-wise or visa-wise, were you allowed to remain?
No, I was allowed to remain. I had no problems with passport. I was a Turkish citizen, but money became a problem, and essentially I had no professional future. Through relatives, I obtained a Canadian visa and went to Ottawa to study library science in order to become a librarian.
You did that?
Yes, and have an income. So that is, I was 23 years old when from Neuchâtel I went to Ottawa. I completed my degree in library science within less than a year, one semester. And then I went to Toronto, joined the Bulgarian Macedonian community in Toronto, rented a room in a Bulgarian family, started looking for a job, found myself a job as a worker in a meatpacking factory, and that is how I started life, real life in Canada. These few months that I spent in the factory probably were the most creative time in my life, because I understood what real life meant, far away from private school in Geneva and ethnographic museums. And
by the time that you were planning to go to Canada, had your parents in Turkey more or less given up on the idea of you coming back to join the family business?
Yes, they started giving up on the idea.
Were they upset?
But they told me that they cannot support me any longer. I was 23 years old, so I should go and try to make a living by myself.
Were they angry?
No.
They were reconciled to your decision?
They were reconciled, there was no problem about that, only I should make a living for myself at the age of 23, that was enough.
Was it very clear to you that there was no point in going back with a degree from Geneva to Turkey and trying to find work, intellectual or academic?
No, that was absurd.
That wouldn't have happened.
Absurd, that wouldn't have happened. But didn't, first of all, it was impossible. I was not a Turk. In Turkey I was not a Turk. I was a Turk in Geneva. So I started working during daytime, and during night time in Toronto I was taking notes about social life of the Bulgarian Macedonian community in Toronto.
Based on your understanding of what the manual of Marcel Mauss taught you about note-taking, or was it rather instinctive?
It was instinctive. It was, although I had the manual always with me. I arrived with this manual in Ottawa. So I started taking notes every evening very systematically.
After the meat factory?
No, every evening, after the meat packing factory.
Yes.
And I was continuously searching for a job. And one day I received 2 job offers. In the morning, I received a job offer from a private school in Toronto to teach French language there.
Swiss French, of course.
Right. And in the afternoon, a phone call from the National Museum of Canada, where I had introduced myself previously, and they told me that their folklorist, their cataloger in folklore, had quit his position, and there were 6 months' salary left. Would I go there in order to continue cataloging the French-Canadian, so-called French-Canadian collection? I
Not a difficult
said
choice.
no to the private school in Geneva, and first thing that I did is to go to the bookstore and buy Ruth Benedict's Patterns of Culture, and with this book I got on the bus to Ottawa from Toronto, and I arrived in Ottawa.
With your bags.
With my bags and Ruth Benedict's Patterns of Culture.
So you broke immediately with Toronto at that point? The meat packing
Immediately.
was finished. Just to go back one moment, you mentioned that the period in the meatpacking factory, soon after arrival in Canada, was one of the most creative. Was that because of the work you were doing in the evenings, in terms of...
Both.
Well, can you describe something about the factory then? It was...
The factory, it is the first time in my life that I discovered what it meant for a human being to make a living. Until then I have been entirely supported by my father. I was sort of a middle class. And basically I believed that money grows on trees or something like that. And my stay in Geneva also, marginalized my perception of normalcy. So my first contact with normal life was in this factory in Toronto, where I had to go every day to work, and it was real work.
What was your salary?
Oh, I don't.
Do you remember?
I don't remember. But I could pay rent, and I could buy necessities, etc., of course. And I discovered at that time what it means to be a worker, essentially, in North America. But
now to Ottawa. You arrive with your suitcases, with Ruth Benedict and the Manuel of Maus still.
Manuel of Maus and my Toronto field notes. So immediately in Toronto, in Ottawa, in the museum, during the day, I was cataloging French-Canadian folklore, which turned out to be 95% and more French from France. Better preserved in Canada than in France.
The periphery.
The periphery. Extraordinary collection, assembled mostly by Monseigneur Savard and by Marius Barbeau, a very great scholar. So during the daytime I was cataloging. During evenings I was writing my field notes from Toronto, which became the first memoir that I had written.
Did colleagues there in Ottawa know of this second passion and support it? Did you share ideas with them, show them your writings?
That happened after I finished the monograph.
Before publication?
Before. I finished the monograph, nighttime, and gave it to my museum director, and also sent it to the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, because there was no literature on this Bulgarian community. And until now, I think my monograph was the only one. There was practically no literature in the Bulgarian Macedonian community. They're 70,000 strong. And that, of course, changed my situation.
In what sense? It was published? It was...
No, it changed my situation in the sense that I had done something. For me, it was important.
You were a scholar in your own right.
Yes. And also, my director knew that I could produce something serious. I was reliable.
Was the daytime work cataloguing this French folklore interesting?
It was not interesting for me because I was not trained in folklore. It's a special field, and you need techniques, etc., etc. And also, I was not that interested in the folklore of non-primitive peoples, if I may express myself like that. I'm sorry. And on the other side, I was fascinated by the literary qualities of the folk texts. Fascinated by the folklore's literary texts, you see.
What does it mean to classify this? What were you actually doing? Were you making card indexes, or?
Many things, you see. For instance, from one song, Les Trois Petits Canards, ou La Chanson de Roland, you will have 100 and 150 different versions. So you had them all in front of you. Some were that short, some were that long. Some had one incipit and another incipit, that is the first verse. Some other had one kind of refrain, refrain, some others had another kind of refrain. You see, you had La Chanson de Roland, an eminently French song, with a refrain about Iroquois. You see, so it got Canadianized, this song, French song, in Canada.
But your job was to note down the differences?
One of my jobs was to try to establish critical texts. For instance, compare the 100 texts and then try to eliminate the refrain, for instance, of Iroquois, and to establish a standard text which was supposed hypothetically to be the original, the first. Also, there is no such thing. To establish the Ur text. To establish a very interesting exercise. But also to classify them, I mean, material came by batches, and so that I had to sift them and to say that is this version belongs to that type, and classify them according to different indexes, are the Thomson index and Dawson index, etc.
Were these all collections held in the museum archives, or were they freshly coming in every day in packets?
Freshly in the museum archives, but we used to receive also other texts, fresh texts.
At this time, when you were doing this, and also in the evening pursuing your own research interests, writing up your notes, was there anybody in the museum who you could call a real mentor, an intellectual advisor?
No. Yes and no. You see, Barbeau was retired already. He was elderly. He was a very eminent man. But he had published well over 100 books and 1,000 articles. He was a graphoman. He was a graphoman. And couldn't stop writing, couldn't sleep. He was an insomniac, so he will wake up in the middle of the night, stay in bed and write. So we shared an office. I had a corner of an office, of his office, behind a screen. And the screen consisted, and on the screen was hung a shilkat blanket. These are beautiful things from the West Coast, original shilkat blanket. Today they are priceless. And my office was full with West Coast artifacts that were collected, that nobody knew to whom they belonged. You know, it was other way. We received one day a very heavy package from British Columbia that they put on the floor. I used to put my feet on top, you see. It turned out to be full with West Coast coppers, ceremonial engraved shields that the mounted police had confiscated during potlatches, because the potlatches were forbidden, and shipped to the museum, and I used them as leg rests, you see. That was, you see the atmosphere there in the museum. Diamond Jeunesse was still alive. Diamond Jeunesse was a very senior figure. He had written the classical ethnography of the Central Eskimos, and at that time, my first publication, as a matter of fact, was the biobibliography of Diamond Jeunesse. No, but I couldn't communicate with him. See, he was about 8 years old. I was a very young man. There was Marcel Rioux. He was French Canadian. He was my immediate superior. He was my chief. He was open-minded, but he was not well trained either. He was half trained in Paris. He was ignorant of American literature. He was doing fieldwork in French Canada. I would say no. I did not have a mentor at that time.
The lingua franca and the language of intellectual debate in the museum was French? Was
both French and English.
At this point, were you conversant and comfortable in English completely?
More or less. More or less.
So what was your first real encounter with ethnography outside of your own immigrant community?
Well, that was going to study for a PhD. You see, I married when I was in the museum. A child was born. I went to see my director and asked for an increase in salary, and he said no until you get a higher degree. So I had to get a higher degree.
You had a BA at this time?
Something like licence. Licence would be equivalent to BA, MA, something like that. So I needed a higher degree. Higher degree, I knew in Europe, in Neuchâtel, for instance, I could go and present a dissertation there. That's all. You didn't study. There were no course requirements. You presented a dissertation. Now, I had presented a PhD dissertation project in Neuchâtel on the Mzap. That is central Algeria in the desert. It's a group of oases. And I had assembled the bibliography of the Mzap and wrote research projects on the Mzap for Neuchâtel at the time. Now, I was told, that I need a higher degree. And I told myself, well, I have to go to Neuchâtel. Everybody advised me against it. And my colleagues there in the museum told me you should go and study in the States. Your English is good enough, I was told.
You had completed your Bulgarian Macedonian.
Yes.
It was published?
It was mimeographed and distributed in various government departments and libraries, etc., etc. And it was published in sections. It started being published in encyclopedias,
articles, references.
And so I started searching where on earth to go to the States to study anthropology.
You had ruled out Neuchâtel. You had decided.
Gradually I started ruling it out because everybody was telling me don't go to that godforsaken place. Who has ever heard about Neuchâtel? Then something happened about West Coast. A student from Columbia University came to study precisely the West Coast coppers. And he was trying to the mineralogical to make a mineralogical analysis of the coppers, trying to discover where the copper as a mineral came from Alaska as native copper or from Peru. That was a mysterious subject. And he spent about a week in the museum working in my office. We shared an office. And he came from Columbia University.
What was his name?
Paul Hazard. I remember his name. I never found anything after that about him. And I told him about my situation, that he said, go to Columbia, it's a good university. The only thing, well, but you know, in English I couldn't write even an application in order to be accepted. Write it in French and send it to Professor Konrad Arnsberg. He reads French very well. I did so, and I was accepted.
This is year 50 something?
57. 56 or something. And I was accepted.
For a PhD program?
For a PhD program by Professor Konrad Arnsberg. And I went to Columbia. Columbia, I had the same feeling as when I arrived at the international school in Geneva. I came from an uncultured place to a cultured place, you see. And now I am coming from an uncultured place, that's the National Museum of Canada, going to a cultured place. Had exactly the same feeling.
Was it your first time in the States? In the US?
I spent a few days in the States previously. But it was the first time in New York City. Huh?
Manhattan?
Yeah, Manhattan.
Uptown, West Side?
Uptown, West Side, 116th Street, etc., etc.
Lovely. We continue in Gangtok, Sikkim. One day later we may be, but we are still back in what year? You've just arrived in New York.
1957, I guess.
And you're arriving at Columbia University.
At Columbia University.
The first time in New York as well?
Yeah, I've been in New York prior to before that. First days or first weeks in New York at the Columbia University were very difficult. I felt lost in this new academic environment. I was totally ignorant of pressures of learning graduate school in America. I thought that studies were organized a little bit like in Geneva. That means in a very leisurely manner. One was not obliged in Geneva to attend courses. And one read just a couple of days before the exams. I soon felt the extremely competitive atmosphere in Columbia. And in a sense, I liked it. Because of this competitive atmosphere at Columbia, that I think that I made it, I succeeded in passing the exams. Competition was so stiff that I thought that I was back in the bazaar of Istanbul. And there was a Greek instructor there who taught me a few things, and he told me what to read, what to not to read, how fast to read. He gave me some coaching about how to adapt to the new atmosphere, and that was it. I started studying under pressure, and I was terrified by what I was told, that we were 40 graduate students admitted, and we were told that in a few years only 4 will graduate. I was terrified by that, but I made it.
Who were the other 3?
I don't know.
None of them went on to become professional anthropologists that you remember?
Helen Safa, I think, became a professional anthropologist. Sidel Silverman, who until last year she was head of the Wenner-Gren Foundation, she became.
What was the intellectual climate like at Columbia? Who were the teachers? Who was calling the shots in terms of books, articles? Initially I was very impressed by the secretariat,
the department secretary, the office of the secretary, because all the pictures of the old professors were hanging on the wall of the secretariat. And first was Franz Boas's picture. It was slightly larger, very slightly larger than the others. And then you had everybody else: Ruth Benedict, Julian Stewart, Margaret Mead, Kroeber, Lowy, Paul Radin, and several others. All of them same size, with the exception of Papa Franz. And also the faculty sort of tried to, very gently, very discreetly, to give you the feeling that that is where anthropology was made in the States. And not Harvard, definitely not Harvard. I mean, in the reading lists, in the bibliographies, very rarely could one find a Harvard book. You see, it was. It is as if Harvard didn't exist, you know. One thought about the time when Boas established anthropology in America and allocated Mesoamerican archaeology to Harvard, and that was it. They were not supposed to do anything else. So that was still a little bit the atmosphere that prevailed at Columbia, although it was the end of that, of the Boasian period, of course. But there were still people like Margaret Mead and others who were trained under Boas and who really devoted a cult to Boas. What else there?
Who was head of department when you arrived?
I don't know. The department was not properly organized because there were these young Turks who were very young. Marvin Harris, Morton Freed were the young Turks at the time. You see.
You weren't a young Turk then?
No, I was a student trying to pass my exams and nothing else. Now, everything that I learned, that I read, was new to me. Every lecture concerned a new course, a new subject matter that I was not aware of. So all that I knew previously was ethnographic descriptions. I was unaware of theory, of anthropological theory. One reason was that theory there was in Geneva, theory was in sociology. You see, there was no such thing as anthropological theory. Durkheim was a sociologist, Marcel Mauss was a sociologist. So from the old school, William Duncan Strong, who became my thesis director, together with Margaret Mead. William Duncan Strong was an archaeologist. He had established plains archaeology, the basic discoveries in reference to plains archaeology, and then South American stratigraphy, Viru Valley stratigraphy he established. But he started, William Duncan Strong started as an ethnographer in northern Labrador among the Mistassini Indians. And that is probably the reason I was already interested in Eskimo. That is why I think that he accepted to be my tutor, my thesis supervisor. Margaret Mead, I took the course of, not the course, the seminar of Margaret Field Methods and Techniques, and which turned out to be essentially a seminar concerned the use of audiovisual recording devices. Margaret Mead was fanatically interested in the new technologies, film and audio recording methods. So her seminar on field methods was extremely interesting, and recently I published an article about this seminar in Russia.
Was she a good teacher?
No, you see, she had an audience. These were mostly young women, female students, who were occupying the first 2 or 3 rows of her classroom, and who were looking at her with extreme admiration and were sort of worshipping her. And Margaret Mead didn't teach much. Let's say out of 30 hours, she probably taught half of that. The other half, there was somebody to replace her. And usually somebody concerned with psychoanalysis, who came out of a psychoanalytic school. That was a feeling that I got.
Was Margaret Mead at this
Involved.
time already a figure in American popular culture?
Oh, very much so.
By this time already?
By this time already, by the early 50s, definitely so. Late 50s, definitely so.
So she had already become a household name on
She
the television, on the radio?
She was a household name on television and radio. She did, because of that, people at Columbia, teachers at Columbia sort of didn't like her much because of the extraordinary, she became a public figure, a public intellectual, and the professors at Columbia objected to that. You see, they were not accustomed to having, a professor who's a famous public figure.
Aside from the competitive element and the survival of the fittest mentality, 20 down to 4, was it an intellectually
40 to 4.
Was it an intellectually stimulating place to be?
Very much so. Very much so. And what I used to hear that most of the students, brighter students who completed their degree, the PhD, they wanted to remain at Columbia, teach, work, do research there. It was very painful for them, very difficult to separate from alma mater. Really, alma mater was in the full sense mater. So that was constantly repeated. One should not forget that Columbia is the only large, prestigious university in the New York area, New York City, which is the largest city in the world, and 10, 12 million people, 14 million people live there. There are many other institutions of higher learning in New York, but only one prestigious, and that's Columbia. So for a New York student, you have to make it to Columbia, or that's it. You had it, and that is that's the root of the competitive spirit that one could feel at Columbia, in the Department of Anthropology.
You mentioned that Harvard was very much not on the books, on the book list.
Yeah.
What were the theoretical influences? Was Europe or Britain present?
No. At the time, that's a difficult question to answer. 1957. Now I forgot the name of the fellow who came from the University of North Carolina to teach kinship. He was just spending a year at Columbia, and he taught the course of kinship, and that was 57. He had practically not heard about Lévi-Strauss. Lévi-Strauss had published a major article in English on kinship in the collected book Anthropology Today. And he was not aware of sort of a French literature and kinship in any way. He was aware of the British literature. Yes. No, see, the feeling, of course, we had to read Radcliffe Brown's classic essays, Malinowski, but The message was that anthropology was made here at Columbia, in America at Columbia. That was the message. But we did have to read the classic British contributions.
And then be critical of them, perhaps. Engage
And
with
then be critical of them, structural functionalism, etc.
So you completed your 2 or 3 years of coursework?
I completed a couple of years of coursework, then a third year of readings, and that is the time when I started research work up north in the Arctic.
How did that happen?
As I mentioned, when I arrived in the National Museum in Ottawa, that was 1954. Same day I arrived also a young French ethnographer by the name of Claude de Goff, who had just graduated from the Institute of Eskimo Studies at Copenhagen. So he was a trained Eskimologist, and Leroy Gourand in Paris had suggested to him to work on the Belcher Island Eskimos, really at the center of Hudson Bay, who have been isolated for a long time from the east coast of Hudson Bay, the Eskimos, the Tivimut. And he spent a summer there, and he did very good work. But during the second summer, he drowned. He was trying to kayak and he drowned. We shared an office also in the museum. The director of the museum asked me to continue Claude de Goff's work, in a sense. He said that Eskimo studies, Eskimo research was very important for the museum and for Canada generally, and it was important that the young men sort of continue his work. So I started I had to become an Eskimologist, despite the fact that I've never done any reading, and I never fantasized about doing field work in the Arctic. My interest was in the desert areas of Africa or Southwest Asia, the Bedouin, or the various Saharan tribes. That's what I was interested in. So already as a student at Columbia during the summers, I had, as an employee of the National Museum of Canada, I had the opportunity to go in the north and study the Eskimos. So during my third field trip up north, when I was still a student at Columbia, I immediately sensed that I belonged in another category in comparison with the other students. The other students during summers, they had to work in order to make some money and to continue to pay for their studies. While I was going to do field work, I was doing field work in a classic ethnographic area, the high Arctic.
You had scholarships for this, or?
No, that's the National Museum money. I was an employee of the National Museum.
At the same time as
At
being
the
a
same
graduate
time,
student?
I was given leave of absence by the National Museum to go and study, and the National Museum paid for my tuition at Columbia.
And also
And for field
everything.
work. So that was.
In the understanding that you would return to
I
Ottawa?
will return to Ottawa and I will become the Eskimologist. That was the understanding.
So, can you give me a sense of your first field trip to the Eskimo land?
My first field trip.
You were 30 years old? Something?
27. My first field trip, I was extremely insecure about the Arctic because I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't read anything on the North, and I didn't know where to start. I knew that profound changes had taken place in the Arctic, mainly due to the presence of the Hudson's Bay Company. I had some knowledge about the classic works, let's say Franz Boas's work on Cumberland Sound, Diamond Genesis among the Copper Eskimos, and essentially the results of the fifth Thule expedition with Knut Rasmussen. I had some knowledge of the classic works. I knew that this classic culture had disappeared, Eskimo classic culture, thanks to the activities of the Hudson's Bay Company and the missionaries. Wherever a Hudson's Bay Company post, HBC post, was a trading post was established, a missionary arrived and settled near it. So changes were drastic. On the other side, understood that this newer culturative period, where the HBC was the prime actor, was not properly described and analyzed. The classic ethnographic contributions refer to the traditional period of the Eskimos, traditional life. I thought that it would be good to start researching the fur trading periods as organized by the Hudson's Bay Company, which was a fur trading company, since there was no real analysis of fur trading and sociological analysis of fur trading. So there was only one American scholar, John Honigman, who had done recently work in the Canadian North, and who did not belong to the classic scholars. Honigman had done extremely interesting psychologically oriented work in the western subarctic among the Casca Indians in northern British Columbia. And after that he moved east to a place called Great Well River on the east coast of Hudson Bay, where lived both Eskimos and Indians. And the Great Well River is located on the tree limit. You see the border of the tree line. On the tree line it is located. And he had done studies there on the interactions between the three ethnic groups, the Anglo-Canadians, Eskimos and Indians, and also on child-rearing patterns, on ethos, and a little bit on subsistence, general ethnography. So I thought that was 1950. So I thought that I should go there 7-8 years later and restudy this community in order to base myself to benefit from the work of John Honeyman that was already done. And I went there. It didn't work out because same year that just a year before I arrived there, the Canadian Air Force had decided to build a large Air Force base with radars, etc. It was the Cold War, 1956, 57, and everybody expected Russian planes flying over the Arctic and bombarding New York and Chicago. So when I arrived there, I found a situation of intense culture contact. But I described it properly. I described the situation of intense cultural contact very well. And it turned out that that was the first study of intense cultural contact published for northern Canada. And it was widely quoted in professional journals. So that was my first field trip. I had to study something that I didn't want to study. As a matter of fact, at Great Well River, trapping had been abandoned already. But I didn't lose sight of my research aim, the sociology of trapping. And for the following summer, I went to Pavangituk, further north on the east coast of Hudson Bay. And same situation. There, a very talented American artist by the name of John Huston. Had been there the previous summer, and he had taught the Eskimos how to carve little figurines. And all of them, there was a market, good market for these little soapstone figurines. All of them had started carving these and had become sculptors. So by the time I arrived, I discovered that had become a community of sculptors. And there again, trapping had been abandoned just the previous year. Anyhow, I was able to draw on the topographic map the trap lines of the Inuit, and I was able really to reconstruct for the couple of previous winters, the ecology and the sociology of trapping. For my third summer, I thought that really I should be more systematic and try to discover the most traditional of Eskimo communities, and I really interviewed missionaries, policemen, traders, etc., and discovered that Pelly Bay, high in the central Arctic, was a community where no Hudson Bay Company post had ever existed. The reason was that the bay is locked by ice all year round, and no boat can enter the fjord. And there is a Catholic missionary there, who certainly must have converted the Eskimos, but they still hunted, trapped, and remembered traditions. So I went there. It turned out that this community was so traditional, thanks to the father, to the missionary, that trapping was not very important in the annual migration cycle. The Pavongnituk Eskimos had up to 100 traps each. The Pelly Bay Eskimos had 3, 4, maybe 5. Trapping was a side activity to seal hunting. So again, there I missed the classic form of trapping. But I found other things, of course. So after I completed my studies, I decided to go back there to Pelly Bay, and after I completed my residence at Harvard and passed my comprehensive examination, I returned there and spent a winter at Pelly Bay, and that was a serious ethnographic experience. There were no houses, there were only igloos for the Eskimos. A few Eskimos lived near the church. The church was a small stone hut where the missionary lived, and nobody else. And it was also, anyhow, a trading post. He traded also, had become a trader, and he traded in ammunition, tea, sugar at Christmas time and Easter, he sold, and axes and knives he sold, tobacco, and that was about it.
A few questions. We've fast forwarded, but I have some personal questions for you. By this time you were married.
Yes.
Did your wife accompany you?
No.
May I ask why?
My wife was not particularly interested in ethnographic fieldwork. Then we had a child already, my son Nicholas, and she had to look after our son, And also I went to places where it was not easy for a wife to come, you know. I myself, Petty Bay, barely survived. I mean, I had to eat native food all the time and had to adapt to extreme cold. My wife simply wouldn't have been able to make it. You see, the Arctic is very different from working here in Sikkim or Nepal. Had I worked in Nepal, certainly my wife would have come here, but there, no. They're very difficult to survive, I say.
Can you give me some sense of the conditions of field work? How did you get there? How did you learn the language? What did you eat?
How did I get there? There was an American dew line base about 50 kilometers south. And I could fly to that base.
In a military aircraft?
Military aircraft. Well, it was commercial aircraft, but hired by the military. Supply aircraft. And an Eskimo sled would wait for me. Because the missionary had radio sled, and from the south I could radio to him to send a sled and to wait for me at the airport.
It strikes me, if I may interrupt my own question, that the missionary and the ethnographer, although they're in radio contact, may have quite different aims in the same area.
Yes.
Did you have good relations with this missionary?
Yes and no. Initially, our relations were very good, and he did help me in my work. My feeling was that he was a little bit bushed. That is a Canadian expression from the Arctic. A trapper can be bushed. After a trapper will spend alone a winter along his trap, running after his trap line, he can become bushed. That means that he's becoming obsessed by little things. For instance, if he's making tea, his teapot has to be put that way and not the other way, you know. And little things like that become extremely important. He also becomes suspicious of everybody. And he doesn't like change. He doesn't like other people visiting him. He feels threatened. Some paranoid characteristics. So my feeling is that the missionary who had been there 15 years alone and must have been bushed. Now in the middle of the winter, when there is no light, etc., when I was there, maybe also I had become bushed myself. And so at the end of our stay, we sort of, I won't say that we became enemies, certainly not, but we were suspicious of each other. This end of my stay was extremely tragic and dramatic, extremely so. The Pelly Bay Eskimos, the Netzelik Eskimos, numbered about 100. One day on the radio we received a message that plane will come with a medical doctor who would take X-ray pictures of the Eskimos. Now the doctor arrived in a plane. He landed on skis, and my igloo was the cleanest, and he put his instrument, the X-ray machine, in my igloo to photograph, you see. So I helped him together. We photographed the Eskimos, and he left. A few days later, everybody was sick, including the missionary.
The missionary had also been photographed?
I don't remember, I cannot tell you. But he was sick also. Everybody was in bed. I was the only one who had immunity, you see, against this sickness. And I went to the missionary, who was lying down, but he was conscious, and asked him, shall I start a generator in order to send a message on the radio to ask for help? He said, no, we had that in the past also, and the sickness cleared, we survived in the past. And true it did. After 4 or 5 days, a week let's say, the Eskimos started getting up and walking around, and the crisis was finished. Few days later, again, everybody in bed, back to bed. Result, 15 people died. I buried them. And, 14 people died. And that is 14% of the community wiped out, So, anyhow, so that was the...
Were you blamed in some way?
Yes.
For having housed this doctor?
Yes, no. I was never officially blamed, but the feeling that I got is that through my questioning about shamanism, I had provoked the anger of a recently deceased, relatively recently deceased man, whose soul struck, you see.
Oh, so it had nothing to do with the doctor and your immunity to his...
No. That is the native explanation. The Eskimo explanation was, you see. Now, it is possible also that the missionary, who was very close to the Eskimos, was suspicious of my work on shamanism. And I suspected later on that probably he feared that I would try to establish in the community a kind of a shamanistic republic, you see, and oppose his real domination, not only spiritual but also social, political domination. That I will revive the shamanistic practice, who had disappeared very recently, and wake up the souls of the dead shaman. And so that was the context in which the missionary and myself separated.
The language, did you learn some?
Some I learned, not much, but I learned not for shamanism. I could not conduct a study on shamanism. I was able to conduct a study about everyday activities, hunting, fishing, trapping. My orientation was almost a study, in my research orientation was almost exclusively in reference to Julian Stewart's ecological theory. And I was searching for the adaptive strategies of the Inuit. And shamanistic studies, they came on the side. I did not expect them.
Did the missionary speak the language?
Oh, as a native, yes.
Did you have an assistant?
I had an interpreter, an assistant, a guide.
Through which language did he interpret?
English. Not from this community. From neighboring community, another Netzlik. There are 2 Netzlik, 3 Netzlik communities. From a neighboring where there was a Hudson Bay store, where English was prevalent. So that was the context.
The food, the living environment. You mentioned an igloo.
Only igloo and native food.
Seal meat.
Seal meat. I had sugar and tobacco. And I welcomed guests and generously offered tea and tobacco, plenty. My tobacco pouch was open for pipe smokers. I smoked a pipe, and that attracted audience. So.
But your assistant lived with you in the igloo?
Yes. Together we spent several months.
Was it difficult to explain when you first arrived what you were doing there and why you were there?
When I arrived at Pelly Bay the first time, I had done previous research work among Eskimos of East Hudson Bay, and I had a name. My name was Sivudli Vignac, the man who is interested in who works on the old things, who loves old things. So I introduced myself like that, and that is, the people understood that I was interested in the old things, which was a perfectly legitimate activity. And that is how we started, that's the way we ended also research, during the filming also.
During these first initial summers in
Yes.
in the Inuit lands, did you make use of audiovisual technology? Did you photograph?
Of course, I photographed a lot. I organized an exhibit of my first photographs at Great Well River just a couple of months ago at Great Well River today. And the Eskimos were fascinated. I did not expect such a enthusiasm. Definitely not. So I did photography, considerable tape recordings. At Pelly Bay, I recorded something like 50, I used something like 50 tapes, Nagra.
Reel to reel?
Yes. Musicologist from Queen's University in Canada, I presume that was her dissertation. She published by the night in 2 volumes. My collection was published. I did not study it. Beverly Coven, anyhow, she studied it. Now the shamanistic songs, the shamanistic texts are being studied by Professor Oosten from the University of Leiden.
Jarig Oosten.
Yes.
I know him well.
Yeah, and by Professor Logrand at Laval University. Together I gave them permission to use the shamanistic texts that I had collected at the time. I did not study them because I produced my analysis of shamanism directly from my field notes as a side activity. You see, I thought at the time, students when interested in a theory, they're fanatically interested in a theory, and they believe that the theory would explain everything. I was firmly convinced, fanatically convinced, that Julian Stewart's theory would explain everything. So I unwillingly collected data on shamanism, and this data tried to fit it in the ecological theory, and or data on suicide, etc. And so I had to take some notes on shamanism because the informants sort of started. I will never forget the context. I don't know why. I asked an old informant by the name of Anernelik, who is the one surviving son of a famous shaman. Anyhow, Anernelik, we were talking about seal hunting, of course, in the past, ecological perspectives, and I asked him who was the biggest shaman, the most powerful shaman at the time. Convinced that he would say his father Orpingalik, Alakanoar Orpingalik. And he said, I expected, he said, no, Avagaiji. He said, how come? Avagaiji was his adoptive father. And then he asked me, do you want me to tell you why Avagaiji was bigger, a stronger shaman? I said, okay, yes, tell me. And he made the sign of the cross first, you see. Catholic. He was going to say a story belonging to the devil, to Satan, who had caribou feet, Satan, up north, according to Protestant tradition. And he said, yes, I was a child one winter in the igloo. Pingalik and Avagaiji were sitting together, and Avagaiji asked Pingalik, do you believe that I can enter through this timag? My whole body can pass through this timag and go deep down in the ocean, to the bottom of the ocean, and see Sedna, the goddess, and come back. And Alakanoa replied, no, I don't believe it. And Avagaiji put first his forefront on top of the timag, then pushed his head inside to the point that the timag started cracking, you see, from the pressure. And then he jumped, he lifted his feet, disappeared in the ocean, and Alakanwar and Nernelik, the young one, could hear him splashing the water, you see, deep down. And he came back the same way. And he said, you see, and Alakanwar believed what he had seen. So, after that, of course, he opened up and started telling all sorts of shamanistic stories, which I recorded, both some in writing, the easiest ones, the others more complicated, as with the songs on tape, and now they're being analyzed by Osten. And
does Osten speak the language?
I don't know. I cannot tell you. And last year he asked me, and I gave him written permission, but I don't know. So that is how it was. Life was very difficult, very constraining.
Did you become ill?
Yes, I became ill once from diarrhea or something like that. So every half hour or so I had to go out to eliminate, which is difficult, because when you eliminate, as soon as you try to pull your pants down, it's cold, by the way, it's 50, 60 degrees, it's wind strong. As soon as you or try to attempt to pull your pants down, immediately from behind you are surrounded by half a dozen dogs who wait in order to eat your fishes, you see. And so it is with your left hand that you pull your pants down, and with in the right hand you hold the dog whip, and you beat the dogs back, you know. So it is not a comfortable position. And I became very weak. You see, in the cold with no food, and I felt that I was weakening by the minute. And then a man came, the son of the latest shaman, and he told me, do you know who passed this sickness to you, who gave you? That means through magical means. No. He said, that man. I believed him. Absolutely, I believed him. So as a matter of fact, after that, my health improved. So plenty of adventures of this sort in the north. Survival is difficult.
Were the greatest challenges physical or psychological?
Psychological. I was young and physically I was very resistant to psychological because you're extremely isolated. I used to travel into camps, and I felt that I can adapt, I can survive here in this constraining environment only if I lose interest in what is going on south, and I take a strong interest in what is going on in front of me. If somebody had told me at the time, that was the Cold War, that an atom bomb had fallen, nuclear bomb had fallen upon Montreal, I would have remained indifferent. So I think now. But when, I don't know, an enemy brought a seal, and they saw him coming from, you see, with the seal, pulling the seal, that was a major event, you know. That was a major event. So that is the condition for psychological survival.
What was the longest that you spent as a PhD student in the field, in one stint?
Well, the winter of Pelly Bay, that was 5-6 months, something like that.
Did you have contact? Did your wife send you letters or something?
Yes.
They arrived?
They arrived, not every day, but I had contact. And essentially, I believed that if there is real danger, radio message could go, and the plane would come.
Did you have daily contact with the missionary as perhaps the sole other outsider? Did you go to his igloo to have tea in the evenings, or?
Yes and no. Not every day, you know. I was traveling. I was not stationed all the time near the mission. When I was stationed near, I was staying near the mission, I would visit him regularly. But I was slightly embarrassed because I did not attend Mass regularly. I went to Mass from time to time. See, the Eskimos, they did not stay near the mission. They traveled, nomad, migrated left and right, and I followed them, running after them.
Did you collect artifacts and material objects for the museum in Ottawa?
Yes, a few. Not much, because there is not much to collect, not even ivory carvings.
But in the process of these field trips during your graduate research, did you begin to develop a passion for the place and think, yes, this is a place I could continue working in? Or were you still hankering after deserts and Sahara?
I did not return to Pelly Bay. I went to Macedonia. After Pelly Bay, after I had written my dissertation, I went to an Indian community in the Yukon Territory called Old Crow. There, that atmosphere was very different. Very different. I was happy. At Pelly Bay, I was oppressed by the cold. Constraints from all sides. At Old Crow, it was probably the happiest time in my life. It was forested area. I had a log cabin. I could buy wood and have somebody to cut it, and I could cook every morning, old Paul, who was a shaman, he owned the log cabin that I rented from him. He had a net in the river. Every morning he used to come and greet me with a pink salmon like that, a big one. You see. I had also plenty of caribou gifts and food and can make fire, happiness, real happiness. And
were Ottawa somewhat disappointed that their Eskimologist turned out to be a salmon lover?
By that time, I could go and study other native communities in northern Canada. I was not obliged to stay all the time with Eskimos.
You still held a position in Ottawa?
I still held a position, but I was on my way out.
So I take it the PhD concluded itself and you received your doctorate?
I will tell you now, the PhD concluded itself. I wrote my dissertation on processes of ecological adaptation. It was immediately published by the National Museum of Canada. Then I went to Old Crow, the Kuching Indian community. I wrote another monograph which was immediately published, and then went to Macedonia, and after Macedonia back to Pelly Bay for a number of years to do the filming work.
Did your wife and child or children accompany you on any of these field trips?
No. Never. My wife was not interested in the company. She was not an anthropologist. She was born and raised in Ethiopia. Her father was a farmer, Swiss. And after that they were transferred to Kenya, because the farm in Ethiopia was nationalized. Despite the fact that she was well acquainted with the realities of the third world, she did not come with me. She did not she was not interested in anthropology, let's say. Let's put it that way.
Was it difficult to jump cultures, languages, climates like this as an anthropologist?
No.
Did you have an ongoing direction, as it were, that held you steady through all these changes? Cultural ecology still?
No. The situation got complicated in 1963. That means my two monographs were just published, Eskimos and Indians. I had the PhD. I had moved out of the museum and to the University of Montreal. And I was told that tape is finishing.
5 minutes.
I started understanding that I needed to add theory to my anthropological researches. That my passion for ethnography would not lead me anywhere. So I decided that I had to move out of the museum and go to university. And that was the greatest mistake I made in my life. That ruined my career and my professional life. I should have stayed in the museum as an ethnographer.
Why did you do it, and why was it a mistake?
I did it partially because I didn't get along with my superior, the chief ethnologist. He was just graduated from Harvard. I was Columbia. I didn't get along with him, and then I was offered a very high salary at the University of Montreal, where the intention was to establish a new department of anthropology.
It didn't exist at that time?
It didn't exist, and I was supposed to establish it.
So in modern parlance, you would have been headhunted?
Yes, exactly.
And the appeal to you was?
I wanted out of the city of Ottawa. I wanted out of Ottawa. I wanted to go to a real city. Ottawa is an artificial city, administrative city, like Canberra,
Right.
a place like that.
Right.
While Montreal is a lively city. It's a real city, Montreal, And after that, I felt deeply that I belonged to French culture. I had the opportunity at the University of Montreal to teach in French. So that is why, with a high salary, with everything, I went to the University of Montreal.
You were hired on the strength of intensive fieldwork, 2 monographs, and a PhD from Columbia?
PhD. And the number of papers produced very quickly, not within years, but within months. So, 1963, I was at the Université de Montréal in Montreal when I was called again by Professor Doug Oliver from Harvard. He was head of anthropology at Harvard to do filming among the Eskimos. And that is how I entered this marginal field of visual ethnography.
Would that have happened had you still been in Ottawa at the museum?
Yes. I had the museum buy a Bolex camera, and I had a special wooden box built for it, and I carried it to the Stoneweir fishing place during my first summer trip to Pelly Bay, and I did shot plenty of footage there, which got lost. And today, the National Film Board of Canada is making a new film. In a couple of months they will start shooting. And these ethnographic film expeditions in the north, you see, with the Netzelik Eskimos. And they desperately need this original footage, the first one of mine, but I cannot find it.
Lost?
It got lost.
Recently or immediately?
God knows. No, not immediately.
You had the chance at least to develop it and view it?
Oh yes, I developed it. It was black and white.
16 millimeter?
16 millimeter. But it
With sound?
No. So I probably would have done something. What, I don't know. But the challenge 1963 that Professor Oliver sort of gave me was tremendous, and that really changed my life, this project. At the annual meeting of the American Anthropological Association. And in my mailbox in the hotel where I was staying, I got a message from a Professor Douglas Oliver, director of the Department of Anthropology at Harvard, who wanted to have lunch with me. I was very astonished, and I told myself, why on earth the most senior anthropologist in America would be interested to have lunch with me? You see? Anyhow, he told me that the committee of anthropologists and educationalists was established in Cambridge, Mass, and with the aim to reform the teaching of social science in American grade schools. That was the intention. He told me that the way history was taught in America was extremely ethnocentric, and that time had come for anthropology to substitute to ethnocentric history, and to develop new teaching strategies based upon the massive use of audiovisual materials. And for that, film ethnographies were needed, and since the Eskimos were the most famous primitive tribe, if I express myself like that, it was appropriate to start with the Eskimos.
So you were then incorporated and hired because of your experience with the ethnic group, not
Yes.
because of your interest in audiovisual documentation.
He didn't know about my interest. I was hired because I had recently done field work in the most traditional Eskimo area. And where did Doug Oliver hear about me? From Connie Arnsberg, who was one of the supervisors for my thesis work. So that is how I arrived in Cambridge, Mass, and was told, sit down, young man, and develop a project. This summer you are going up north. We will find for you the best cameraman in the world, and there are no financial limitations, but we want the visual material. First of all, you should try to shoot traditional culture, that means some reconstruction, although we heard that Paley Bay Eskimos are pretty traditional, you should make them more traditional than they are. First. Second, the material that you will shoot, the shooting style would be simple enough for grade school children, 7, 8 years old, to understand what is going on the screen. And so that 8-year-old children will be able to build a conceptual model of a primitive society. That's the task.
You still held your position at the university in Montreal.
Yes. Leave of absence.
So this was a consultancy or
Consultancy, leave of absence, etc., etc.
Were you thrilled or somewhat daunted by this task?
Both. I was extremely thrilled and daunted. I didn't know anything about what was lying ahead, and that was it.
But they were also asking you to essentially create a storyboard, a script, or would someone else do that?
No, I wrote something like a script. No. I wrote something like an outline, let's say, a plan for filming. I had an extremely good film producer. The producer was an outstanding man, Kevin Smith, very intelligent, very capable, and I had a committee, an academic committee. Chairman of the academic committee was Margaret Mead, so black family. So she used to come to Cambridge, Mass, sit on the committee. Other members of the committee were Sherry Washburn, the physical anthropologist. Then Brunner, who was director of the Institute of Cognitive Psychology at Harvard, who was the most senior sort of disciple, a student of Piaget, again, back to the old family, you see. But he was not terrorized, castrated by Piaget like the others, because he didn't stay long enough. And so it was a distinguished, also Bob Adams was on the committee. Bob Adams, who later became secretary of the Smithsonian. And so it was a distinguished group. Let's say the most senior American anthropologists were there on my committee. And I was supposed to go up north and bring the new materials with which American education was supposed to be changed, transformed profoundly. And the new educational strategies established for the whole of America.
Were there other similar projects among Native American peoples then, at the same time?
No.
While you were going north, were there others going to the Oneida, or?
No.
You were the sole film project?
of the film project. That was the only film project of its size in history, in the history of visual anthropology.
How many hours were you expected to document?
I didn't know anything at the beginning. I know that I went there, I was given a cameraman, filmmaker, supposedly great talent. He was the only professional Arctic filmmaker. His name was Doug Wilkinson. He had spent 20 years working for the National Film Board of Canada, and he had made several of the classic films on the north. One is Angoti, the other is Land of the Long Day. And so I was told, here is a cameraman, director cameraman. He has a plane. You will fly with him in his plane. He has all the equipment that is necessary. And I decided we should go on summer at a stone weir, which I tried to film at a stone weir. So that is how it started.
These days, the few visual anthropologists I know who work with commercial television, they speak of essentially being the anthropologist who the director commands to find something out or to find a location.
No.
In this case, were you the boss?
There is no such thing as a boss. I was entirely responsible, in charge and full control as far as content was concerned. I was not supposed to tell the cameraman what lens to use and how to shoot. It was not my business. To the point that in my written contract, I was not supposed to touch the camera. I was totally forbidden access to the equipment. I was not supposed even to have a still camera. I have no still pictures of these expeditions. So that we would be free to entirely devote all our time and energy to the movie and to the movie camera, not to the still cameras.
But in the sense of deciding when to go, where to shoot, you were the boss.
I was where to go, when to go, and what to shoot. I was responsible for the structure of the films. After that, during editing. So we went with a grant of the Ford Foundation. We spent 2 months with Doug Wilkinson at the stone weir. We almost killed each other, and I have to admit now that probably I was at fault. And but anyhow, we survived. The reason was that I started teaching him. I had just graduated from Margaret Mead Seminar on Field Methods and Techniques, and that was visual ethnography. And I was convinced that I knew everything in this business. Everything I knew. And I started teaching him. Now this man had 20-25 years of film work behind him. And he was a real professional. And he had made the classic films for the Canadian North. And the result was that we almost killed each other. I tried to teach him film, not ethnography, film.
You ignored your contract.
Yes, to a certain extent. So that was a highly unpleasant story. Anyhow, we shot material, and we did send the material south. And when the committee members and the foundation heads saw the material, they said, "My God, that's a miracle. That is a miracle that we didn't know that such traditional Eskimos survived today." And that was it. And immediately after that, we obtained all the money that we needed from the National Science Foundation, NSF, and we were able to continue filming over a period of 3 years.
How many hours of footage did you shoot eventually of the Eskimo areas?
Now let me see. We followed one family over a period of 13 months. 13 months in the field with cameras. One family. And a few supporting protagonists around. Small community. Community is so small. week for shot close, I think, to 500,000 feet of film. So, Doug Wilkinson refused to continue work with me. It was not exactly like that. He fell sick. When the fall arrived, snow fell, he couldn't breathe in windy weather. As soon as the wind rose, he started suffocating, and we had to evacuate him. The problem is that he must have had psychological problems also, I don't know. Anyhow, he left, and I found myself alone. The producer, very good man, found two men in Toronto. One 30 years old, his name was Ken Post, and the other 45 years old. He sent the two of them immediately. He said, if something happens to the one, you'll have another one. Okay. The older fellow collapsed within 3 or 4 days. He thought that he would sit on a sled, the dogs will pull the sled, and that's the way it would go. And it didn't go that way, because when we hit pack ice, he has to pull the sled himself together with the dogs, you see, and that is excruciating. So he simply physically collapsed, and I had to take him and put him on a sled, call up again radio, missionary, the generator, radio, call a plane and evacuate him. So 2 of us remained. Ken Post, 30 years old, and I also 30 years old. We stayed 9 months together. I didn't hear a single word of complaint from Ken Post. Not a word about food, about being tired, about only once I didn't give him time to reload the camera and clean the lens. You see, because there was something happening fast. And not a word of complaint. And we spent 9 months together. So, meanwhile, editing was going on in Boston.
You weren't in control of that process, the editing?
Yes,
you were
I
as
was. I was. Now, for the end, we arrived for the most major activities, the drum dances, the shamanistic seances, and winter seal hunting at the breeding holes. I thought that I should continue with Kevin Post. The producer said no, he's not good enough. He's good for the ethnographic work, but we need a man with different capabilities. So we started searching. I went to see Michel Brault from the National Film Board. He immediately turned us down. I'm not interested in filling up the camera, emptying it, and no, that's not creative work for him. I'm an artist, he means, you see. Okay, so basically the producer selected two men. One was, don't forget his name. Anyhow, one was a relatively young man, 35 years old, Bob Young, commercial, extremely commercial. He was making National Geographic specials. He was working for the National Geographic, successfully in CBS, or CBS he was working. The other was teaching film at MIT, and he was the cameraman of Flaherty for shooting Louisiana Story, and the feature, Louisiana Story, and he had made a documentary, very interesting, and Kennedy, called Primary. Now, no, I don't remember it. Anyhow, Bob Young came. I was up north. I didn't know the men. I was with the Eskimos when Bob Young landed. And a few moments after he landed, let's say after the plane took over, I had prepared the setting for shooting. I told him we start. He immediately opened the camera, took the camera and started shooting. And within minutes, when he started shooting, I understood that I was in the presence of a great artist. The difference between the previous shootings, you see, and this kind of shooting was tremendous. I mean, he was not shooting with a camera, he was painting. You get a feeling that he was painting. With such facility and elegance, he was following movement, you know. So that was it. And we spent 2 months together. Ken Post was there also as an assistant cameraman. And we shot brilliant material. We shot, I think, 35,000 feet of film with 2 cameras. One camera inside the igloo, one camera outside, frozen outside the igloo.
The 3 of you only, or there's also a sound team?
No.
Other assistants?
No. We worked together, 2 of us, cameraman and myself. In this particular case, special case, first-class cameraman arrived from Hollywood practically, and
The assistant?
And the assistant who had to stay traditionally. It was impossible to dismiss him, you know.
Was it clear how many hours of film, of finished film, for the students of grade school would be
11
produced from this?
hours. We produced 11 hours with no English commentary or English subtitling. Everything is in Eskimo, and the film is edited in such a way for children to follow the activities and to be able to understand what is going on in an extremely exotic society.
Was the choice to use no English language as subtitle or voiceover your editorial decision?
No! Committee. The Committee of Scholars with Margaret Mead on top. They decided that ideally for the new pedagogy, relativistic pedagogy, anti-ethnocentric, etc., concept building, where concepts were supposed to be infused in children's minds. I don't know, very mysterious approach. Ideally, school children, American school children, should have been taken to the Arctic to become field workers themselves and to have a direct look at Eskimo life. Since that was impossible, the Eskimo lifestyle, Eskimo life has to be brought into the classroom with as little artifice as possible. So we were forbidden, for instance, to use the Zoom. There's no all film gimmicks sort of were eliminated in editing also. So no English commentary, no English subtitling, and one had to edit in such a way for the material to be, the visual text to be intelligible to grade school children. It's not easy. Of course, we eliminated shamanism.
Was there an
That's
understanding in
confusing.
your contract that the film stock, that you would have access to it for ethnographic purposes, for research, for teaching other than the 11 hours of film?
Yes, presume so.
And who was cataloguing this while you were producing it in the field? Was there a whole team of people?
No.
So you had to return to go through everything yourself?
You see, we spent 13 months, but in the context of 4 expeditions up north. I was returning, going to Cambridge, working with the editor, writing notes, indexing, etc., and essentially establishing the structures of the film, of the films.
Were they all released in one go or sequentially?
No, they were sequentially. They were released in all of them by the end of the 60s. We started shooting in 63. We finished editing 69.
And what was the series called?
The Netzlik Eskimo film series.
And how was it received by the American public?
It was received enthusiastically for some time. It was received enthusiastically. There were great difficulties with the pedagogues, with the educationalists. Doug Oliver had retired meanwhile. Jerome Brunner had replaced him, the cognitive psychologist at Harvard. Sherry Washburn had gone back to California. And basically I found myself alone with Jerry Brunner. And he decided that we should develop a unit for grade 5. And the unit should be called Men, a Course of Study. The intention was to teach American children about the attributes of men. What makes men human? What makes men human? And we were supposed to use in classrooms the Eskimo visual materials for children to discover, not to be taught by a professor, by an instructor, but to discover, looking at the films, what makes us human, what makes the children in Cambridge Maths human. You see. And also what is the difference, let's say cultural difference, but that is easy. Cultural differences are easy. The idea was to teach what makes men human. There is a book published by Peter Dow, who was the administrator of the project, Harvard University Press, and this experience. So initially a program was created called MACOS, Man, a Course of Study. MACOS was established, it was distributed in 4,000 or 5,000 schools in the States. I mean, there were booklets, games to go with it, all sorts of exercises, teacher training institute. 20 teacher training institutes were established in order to teach the teachers how to use the material. Revolutionary approach. And in this context also television arrived. All of a sudden television learned about the existence of this material. And they called me with Bob Young to edit an ethnographic special for CBS. And we rented a suite in a hotel, put a moviola in it, a Steinbeck, and started editing a television special for Michael Dan, director of programming, CBS. And on March 25th, I don't know, 26 affiliated stations of CBS broadcast Eskimo Fight for Life. We were sitting with Bob Young in the office of Michael Dan at CBS Tower, you know. And one wall of the office was covered with TV sets representing the different affiliated CBS stations, and we started with a pretty low rating. And suddenly the Nielsen rating increased, and at the end we beat National Geographic. You see, at the end we beat the National Geographic, and that was it.
I take it that this did have English.
Oh, yes. Then there were other spin-offs, they're called. The other BBC made a 2-hour television version. Film Board made a children's television version. Altogether, there have been over 200 television bookings worldwide.
Of the same edited footage?
Different formats. Dutch television, German television, and Russian television, they broadcast the 11 hours. I know for German television the 11 hours because they put German commentary. And just in order to allow me to check on it, they had it translated into English, a big book like that. And they broadcast it in Germany between Christmas and New Year as a national cultural event.
Which year?
God knows, I don't remember anything. And BBC 2 hours.
You mentioned some problems with the BBC. Can you...
Different film for Afghanistan.
Okay.
So that beginnings were euphoric. Museums. If you walk today into the museum, Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, you will find a screening room where continuously the Netflix series is being presented there to children. Other museums, recently last year, a book was published, American textbook, on American Indians, called This Land Was Theirs. It is the classic textbook about American Indian culture and cultural history. Wendell Oswald wrote it, you see. It is the 7th edition. Every 3rd year or 4th year there's a new edition coming. Really the mass distribution. And he had a chapter, he's an Eskimologist himself, Napaskiak, Western Alaska. He replaced his chapter and his Eskimos, Napaskiak, with the Netsilik Eskimos. Because the students want a classic Eskimo tribe. You see, with dog teams and with igloos, and Napaskiak don't have that. They're sedentary. And he mentions the film, and he says, the best ethnographic films, I don't remember that, but I know of any for any American Indian tribe or group, etc., etc. And so that lasted for a few years, and then there was a terrible backlash. In parent-teachers committees, parents started complaining that their children have been greatly disturbed by watching new films about killing seals, killing nice animals, eating raw meat, etc., 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 etc. Result, there was a national debate on television, in the press, radio, all across America, coast to coast. National debate that reached Congress, House of Representatives, plenary session, full house, May 11, 1976. And where Representative Conlon, Republican from Arizona, Bible Belt, made a speech about these films and the course, essentially, Manic course of study, saying that the course aimed at unteaching Judeo-Christian family values and substituting anything goes philosophy. Anything goes philosophy, etc., 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 etc. And for the films also terrible things. He said, then the House Science and Technology Committee appointed a special commission to investigate that, because this program had been funded with federal money. to investigate that, I was in Afghanistan. And Margaret Mead went twice to testify in front to the Science and Technology Committee because she was head of the supervisory board. And anyhow, when I came back from Afghanistan, I discovered that first my reputation was ruined, that the very department of NSF, which was dealing in education, had been disbanded. 35 people had lost their jobs, etc., etc. That was it. That was the end of my film ambitions.
Were you named in these hearings as an anthropologist who is guilty of un-American values and inculcating bad ideas?
I don't know. I was not present in the discussion. I was in Afghanistan. It was Margaret Mead and Peter Dow. You have to consult, if you are interested, the book of Peter Dow's book. But I wrote an article about that in Anthropology Today. I published an article. Easy to find in Anthropology Today. Summarizing, just in 5-10 pages, summarizing these controversies and quoting the Congress minutes of, so that there would be no, and that's it.
I tell you what doesn't feature very much in your story so far is being a professor in Canada, in Montreal University. Did you spend a lot of time away? Did you teach? Did you have graduate students?
Yes, I taught. I had graduate students, but essentially I was in the field contributing, not filming, but contributing, organizing film projects.
And that was tolerated by the faculty?
Yeah,
there?
That was tolerated. And I have your card. I would like to send you information about the new film that the film board will be making next month. And precisely on these issues that I mentioned.
You mentioned about half an hour ago that the worst decision you made, professionally speaking, was to leave the museum.
Yes.
Still, I haven't heard why. This all sounds quite interesting, what you've done since you left the museum.
I wouldn't have been able to go to Afghanistan, for instance, or to come here had I been in the National Museum. The National Museum, that means Northern Canada. I was allowed to work in Northern Canada. You see, when I was in the museum, I was a beginner, of course, but the museum imposed constraints and discipline on my various activities. When I quit the museum and arrived in Cambridge, Mass, all constraints disappeared, discipline disappeared, and I melted, sort of what to say. I started moving from one end of the world to the other end of the world, you see, and getting engaged into fancy projects, and I stopped acting as an anthropologist to a certain extent. While had I stayed in the museum, I would have produced other monographs on the Eskimos, maybe not related to cultural ecology and things like that.
I see. So what you're saying is that after the departure from the museum, you helped supervise, organize, instrument many films, and you taught a lot, but the real hardcore ethnography,
yes,
not so
hardcore
much.
ethnography, I did not make it. There were other reasons also. The Eskimos had changed. Beginning the 70s, the new political ideology appeared among the native peoples of North America generally. And they started hating anthropology and anthropologists as exploiters who represented them. Time had come now for them to represent themselves. Several times I tried to work in these new conditions and found it disappointing, to say the least. I could collect place names for the Eskimo associations in order to demonstrate that this land was theirs in front of court when they were discussing about land rights. That I could do, and I did it, as a matter of fact. And so basically there was nothing for me to study, you see. To study the impact of old age pensions on Eskimo communities. I could do that, but it was of no great interest to me. Then in Afghanistan, I didn't write the monograph I was supposed to write. I published 1,000 articles or so. The reason was that the war arrived in Afghanistan. I had prepared myself to continue my work in Afghanistan. Couldn't. A vicious war. So these are events about which I'm not responsible, you see. So basically the world changed. That is why so many French anthropologists had quit their field stations in their past colonies, and they moved back to France studying witchcraft in the French countryside, you see. So that is why I decided to go back to the Balkans when communism collapsed.
To conclude, because it's getting late, a couple of final questions. You mentioned on one of our walks the other day that you were happy to leave North America. In fact, it was time to leave North America when you did. And you also mentioned that the pension, the retirement package of a North American university professor, goes a long way in the Balkans.
Oh, yes.
That I can believe. What was the motivation for leaving North America? Why did you want to leave?
You see, when I was in North America, there were moments when I could make contributions of great public interest, like beating the National Geographic on CBS. When time comes, when you realize that you cannot do that any longer, it's better to get out. You see, and it is better to get out. And I got out. So, had I been retired in Montreal, I would have stayed in an apartment and done what? Nothing. Nothing. Had I stayed in the museum, you see, I would have continued research and writing in the libraries in retirement. But
as it is, what are you?
Retired in Canada, you have no access to grants. How can I go up north without a grant? I mean, you cannot do research work in northern Canada until under two if you don't have a budget of $200 a day. It's terribly expensive. Now Eskimos and Indians, they ask something like $30 an hour for interviews. $30 an hour. They want to go to court now. Maybe that is going to be against me in the new film, because I didn't pay my protagonist during filmmaking. But I was not paid. Nobody was paid at the time. Nobody. National Film Board never paid a penny to protagonists. I mean, now they want money. So you see, this is a nasty environment up north, and They don't want to have anything to do with it. It's not anthropology. It is something. So that's it. What else?
To conclude, how are you spending your retirement?
Well, we finished the fifth film on the Balkans, on Muslim ideology among the Pomak. The Pomak are Bulgarian-speaking Muslims. Same structural position as the Bosniak, who fought in the war in Kosovo. You see, not Kosovo, I'm sorry, in Kosovo they are the Albanian Muslims. In Bosnia, they are Serbian-speaking, Slavic-speaking Muslims. The same people, same kind of people exist in Bulgaria. They're called Pomak. And what are their ideological orientations after September 11th? That's the question that we try to answer. In the context, there are new songs, for instance, gypsy songs, invented in Bulgaria. You can hear them in taxis and the streets about Osama. Osama, Osama bin Laden, Osama, Osama. And down, deep down, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda. You see, that is the context. That is the context. September 11th. And being a Muslim in the Balkans, what does it mean after September 11th? You go to America as a refugee, you go to America and you say, Allah bless my family. You see, that is their motto. Now they come back from America after they have made money. They come back to the village and in English they say, Allah bless my family.
On which happy note, you too have come back from America, and are living in Sofia. And I'd like to thank you for these 2.5 hours of interview.
Thank you.